Government, thank you for your interest in Texas, but we prefer you to peddle your obsolete technology elsewhere. I encourage you to expend your resources in a place where private property rights are not held in such high regard.
Remember Pearl Harbor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Punching Left. I'm AJ Wilms, joined here with my co-host Mike Lauber, and wow, remember Pearl Harbor. Let's all remember Pearl Harbor today, May 19th, 2022, and that was from the great state of Texas. Mike, what are your thoughts on that opening video there? Microphone is muted.
Texas has to be like the greatest place on earth.
Yes, it is quite fantastic. We love Texas, and the only state I think that can compete with how great Texas is the great state of Florida.
Yes. Ron DeSantis is at it again. He's got a double punch for the left today.
Yeah, so DeSantis obviously doing fantastic stuff in Florida, kicking out the groomers, attacking Disney for their very malicious attacks on children and families, which is rather ironic because you'd think Disney would be like the most pro-children, pro-family company like in the world. Turns out like they're the most pro-child grooming, most anti-nuclear family company that there ever has been in existence.
Yeah, I'm sure Walt Disney is turning over in his grave or in his cryo chamber, I guess, depending on which what you believe there.
Yeah, well, you know, interestingly enough, Ron DeSantis continues to take these W's. And Mike, why don't you explain what Ron DeSantis just recently did and what bill he signed into law here?
Yeah, so just recently, I believe this was yesterday, they signed into law a bill that'll protect people from protesters at their home or any other harassment at any private residence. And this is, again, in response to what's happening to people the Supreme Court right now with these anti-abortion psychos. And then also, you know, we're going into, it's almost riot season again. They're cranking it up because it's an election year. So
yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's creepy to think, too, or like it's very frightening to think that BLM was going into the suburbs and like yelling at people and harassing people. And it's fun. It's really funny. I was just thinking about this like literally yesterday, how the magical word in America is like the word racist. And if you call anyone racist, that just justifies any action. And if you want anything in the world, anything at all you have to do is accuse the person who has the thing you want as racist and then demand that if they are not racist, they have to give over the thing to you. And this is exactly what BLM was doing in the suburbs. I remember seeing this video of this liberal guy literally had a BLM or like a love, not hate or whatever, you know, campaign poster or whatever outside of on his lawn. And the sign was there, and he's obviously a liberal. He's very progressive, and he's standing out there, and there's this massive mob of BLM rioters, and they're yelling at the guy, and they're like, "You racist! You're racist!" And he's like, "I'm not racist. I love black people." And they're like, "Okay, give us your house then." And he's like, "What? You want my house?" And they're like, "Yeah, prove you're not racist. Give us your house."
Yeah, well, I mean, we saw the same thing too. I remember another one with I think this was also in Seattle, where they were filming out the window, had the sign, they're in support, then all of a sudden a brick comes through the window and they're yelling at them, you know, again, we're on your side.
Oh yeah, I remember, we're on your side, we're on your side. That there is no sides with BLM. It's like you're either like, it's not even like with us or against us. It's like you're with us and a part of us, or you're with us but not us, so you're against us.
Yeah. Well, I know somebody too that wasn't her, it's one of her neighbors, had a big we support BLM sign up in their front yard, and they live in Minnesota just a few blocks off of Lake Street where a lot of that rioting took place, so obviously like spillover hit their street, and even the house with this big BLM We Stand With You sign got vandalized, the sign had holes through it and everything else, and it was the protesters that did it was the rioters.
Yeah, of course. So this happens all the time where houses and people's homes are literally being attacked by BLM and Antifa. And we saw so many companies, so many private corporations. We saw mom and pop stores just get completely vandalized, looted, lit ablaze. And they are not stopping at just like companies and stores. They're coming to your homes. And this is what they did in the summer of 2020. And this is going to be happening more in the future. And I think it's going to happen almost like you said, Mike, like in seasons, right? And not necessarily just like with the election cycles, although that will happen. But I think, too, increasingly, next time you get the next George Floyd, you can expect even more people's homes to be vandalized and more people to be harassed. So it's good that DeSantis is taking actions like this.
Yeah, definitely, because they have realized it's a form of political terrorism, that it works and it helps them get what they want. So the left will continue to do this. And I don't think it'll just be for issues like abortion or the next George Floyd or whatever. It's going to be anything they don't get their way on, or anytime there's pushback, or anytime the right starts to mobilize, they're going to use this as a way against them, that they'll resort to violence first, and they're going to claim that that was to stop the right from committing their acts of violence.
Yeah, I think that's insane too, because I've actually, I really like studying like crazy people. I think it's really interesting. Like a lot of teenage girls are into studying like psycho killers or whatever. I'm interested in like political crazy people. So I've actually watched lectures from like Antifa people, like pro Antifa. I guess you call them like speeches or whatever. And they're always in these crappy public libraries, and it's all these like really dysgenic people. But one thing that stood out to me that these people say is that their acts of violence are justified because what they're doing is they're preventing the next Holocaust or whatever. They're preventing the next genocide of Native Americans or of black people or whatever in America. So they say our violence is justified because we're stopping worse violence in the future, which of course is like completely nonsensical. We want like a Christian world where like, we have less murders, where we have more police to prevent crime and less abortions killing babies. But in their mind, I mean, they think that we're going to implement like, some giant genocide.
Yeah, and I always wonder, like, how many of them actually even believe that, or is this just the rhetoric that they use to justify what they're doing and furthering their political will?
Yeah, and I think what it is that the people who actually like control things, the people with like the money, like the Soroses or whatever, like they full well know that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
It's in their best interest to, whether it's ideologically or economically, to have a very global market and to not have a strong unified nation that fights for its people. They want like a disunified people who only fight for like their job and their company, and that's it, right? So I think the people at the top know this is all like BS. But the people at the bottom are like all these mentally ill people. Like literally, if you watch Antifa videos or whatever, like of them in the streets burning down buildings, or of them in their public libraries giving speeches, they're always like these very like mentally ill looking people.
Yeah, well, I think we've also seen this recently with the abortion protesters, where we see the signs like, what was it, a fetus equals tasty snack. Like, well, that's not something like a normal human being is going to say.
Yeah.
Even somebody that is pro-abortion, I don't think most of them are going to resort to saying that.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of like wartime propaganda or whatever. I'm not seeing like a lot of Russians like I eat Ukrainians or whatever. I don't see like I don't know. The Rwandan genocide where they're like I eat the Rwandans or whatever. It's like or with the Congolese, which one? Either way, to take things to this extent is kind of like. People don't usually do this. That is like uniquely strange. You do realize like this amount of cruelty where you dehumanize your enemies to the point where they're like a sandwich to you or whatever, like something to be eaten. It's actually pretty insane to me.
Yeah, it's really just sick. I mean, it is just mental disorder on display. But I think that's the whole. I feel like they know they've lost the argument at this point, so now it's almost like shock value that they're just trying to shock people. And
yeah.
I don't know if this is another form of terrorism, because they have to know they're losing the argument when this is what they're showing, and the argument is no longer about like safe, legal, and rare. It's 9 months, maybe more, maybe 10 months, maybe into the fourth trimester.
Yeah. And ironically, I mean, we have bills, as you've brought up in the past, like infanticide bills, where even after the baby is born, some state legislatures are trying to push that you can still kill your baby. There's been doctors who have admitted on camera, undercover cameras, that is, that they have killed babies after they're born, and they've like taken crying, living, it's always a living baby, but like crying baby out of the womb, and then had to kill it because it was a botched abortion or for whatever other reason.
Yeah, I think it was Gosnell was the one that they would like put them in a closet after they were born alive, and then
was that in Virginia?
Might have been Pennsylvania.
Because I know, well, see, the Virginia governor I know too was like, oh, we keep them comfortable, and I think there was something about closets there as well. I mean,
could have been.
The left is trying to put like baby corpses in closets. Again, the right, we're not trying to like murder babies and stuff them in like closets to starve to death or whatever. We're trying to put like gays in the closet, metaphorically. So there is a big difference between the left and the right.
Yeah, it's a literal closet on their side, and more of a metaphorical closet on our side.
Of course.
Ron DeSantis, again, like they just can't help but keep winning. So similar to Texas and I believe Arizona, they are now also going to start busing these illegal aliens that the Biden administration is still illegally flying from Texas and California to other states. busing them to Delaware, to
Yes.
Sleepy Joe's hometown.
Thank God, because I don't care where they send them. Preferably, like I would hope that they could send them out of America. But if we're sending them domestically anywhere, send them to blue states, because the states like Florida and Texas, they're a lot more purple than people think they are. And with increased like immigration, especially for people who don't respect the laws of this nation, they're probably not going to be these like red, white, and blue blooded Americans who are voting Republican.
Oh no, and it's also, it's not just the voting, or that's a potential problem, or them potentially voting. It kills the community they're in, because you have all these people now that are dependent on either welfare benefits, or they're working jobs under the counter that which depresses wages. They're taking up housing, increasing the cost for everybody else there. I mean, it always hurts the poorest among us the most when you have this giant influx of illegal aliens.
Yeah, and also like on an economical level as well, and on an economic level, of course, but and also you can think about on the kind of social level. It's like, not only do you not have now you're paying more tax to support all of these people who are having kids and putting their kids into public school, but on top of that, now your kid has to go to school with all those children because maybe you can't afford a private school, and we'll talk later on about the terrible education system in America. But it's upsetting because it's not just the economic aspect where you're getting kind of the short end of the stick, having to pay more taxes to take care of people who have never contributed a single day in their life to this nation, whereas you may go back generations contributing and building this nation. But also then your child is going to have to suffer through, as well as you and the rest of your family, with the repercussions on a social level with all of this mass migration.
Yeah, when you start increasing class sizes where they're doubling, tripling like that, especially in some areas.
And they can't speak English.
Yes, that's what I was going to get to next. Yeah, you have English as a second language teachers too that have to come in, try to retrain them. Or in other areas, they're holding class in Spanish. I know in a few cities now, because they literally can't find anybody that can work with them to get them to learn English and educate them.
Is there a point in like teaching someone like Pythagoras theorem if they can't even speak English in America? Like, I'm sorry, but that should be probably the first priority for bringing in massive amounts of people. Like, quick, teach them like a squared plus b squared equals c squared. No, just teach them English at least.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you can't whether you're here legally or not, if you can't speak the language, you're always going to be a second-class citizen. Because certain doors are just closed to you. If you can't speak the language, you're not going to move up within a company. You're going to end up in a low menial job, or doing something that only serves a community that speaks Spanish or whatever it is that you came here speaking.
Yeah, and as in any country, I mean, if we moved to Mexico tomorrow, right? We would be the second-class citizens and way worse off than non-English speakers are in America. I mean, at least they can go work in like several different fast food industries and such. I was at a McDonald's in Austin, Texas once, and they only had signs in Spanish. It wasn't even bilingual. It was just like, I can't even read it, but it was like hiring, whatever, but it was all in Spanish. And the person at the window like only spoke Spanish, and they had to get like the teenage, white guy, like the gringo, to come over and like talk to me so I could order my food. But I mean, that's in Austin, Texas. That's not in the Deep South or in Southern California. So, I mean, at least if you're here and you don't speak English and you speak Spanish, you can pretty much get a job or whatever. But if we were living in Mexico, let's say, that would be we'd be homeless, and we wouldn't even be able to beg for cash.
Exactly. There would be no accommodation, no attempt to. You'd probably find a few people that spoke English that might try to help you, that assumed you're like a lost tourist. But, they're not going to, a company's not going to go out of their way to have somebody translate instructions for you the same way they do here. And I think this is
or even like at government officials, right? Like at the DMV, they always have to have a translator now. And it's like, I don't know if this is by law or whatever, or if it's just like an accommodation that we always make for everyone. But I mean, these are our taxpayer dollars going towards helping people who don't even want to learn the language of our nation live freely and live comfortably even in America.
And that kind of brings up something else. I mean, English is not instituted as our national language, and it needs to be. I mean, almost every other country on earth has whatever language they speak widely as their national language. And a few countries that are bilingual, they tend to have problems of basically it's split into two different peoples. That you have the French-speaking side, the English-speaking side, or whatever the case is, and it does end up becoming two separate societies.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing I know in Canada is like the French and the English, because I took a comparative government class while in college, and something I learned was how like hardcore the like French are about their like ethno-nationalism. Basically, like they're like, we're francophones, we want our own country, and they went so far as like there was like these French militias, the FLQ, I believe they were called, and they were like kidnapping people and killing people and stuff. And then Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's dad, used to be a card-carrying communist, by the way. He's prime minister at the time. He orders all these like soldiers into Quebec, into I think it was Montreal or something, and he had like tanks on every street and soldiers on every corner. They were doing like warrantless like searches of people's houses, and he's like, you guys declared war on Canada, and they're like, what? But it all stemmed from the fact that the French wanted to separate from Canada and be their own little ethno state, but the Canadian government wouldn't let them, and it was shy of like 1 or 2 votes that they weren't allowed to leave. So yeah, there is massive conflict, even just on a language level. What's the difference between like Anglos and French people versus like American and Hispanic people, right? There's probably a closer relationship between French and English, but just the language is what separates them to that extent.
Yeah, because I mean, think about it. That's while living all under the same country, that it's just 2 separate provinces in Canada, and the big thing that divides them is language. But that's all that it took for a separatist movement to form, and one that was apparently big enough for there to be tanks in the streets to stop the rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah, so we need to keep in mind that like these differences are not as trivial as people make them out to be, because at the end of the day, like the French people and the English people or whatever, whether it's in France and England, or whether it's in Canada with the rest of Canada and Quebec, there are differences between these two peoples, and they do have different languages, but that's not the only thing that's different between them, even if it's the most apparent. And the same thing is true with America and Mexico and America and Canada. I don't want to share a country with Canada. I think America is a unique and special country, and I think we are different from Canada. We do speak the same language. We pretty much have the exact same cultures, and there's not a lot of differences between the two of us, but I do want us to be a unique and strong nation separate from Canada, because the Canadian people are their own people. And in the same way, the Mexican people are their own people, and they should have their own country, and we should have our own.
Yeah, and I do think like between America and Canada, there are enough differences between like our values and our cultures that it is definitely 2 distinct groups and 2 distinct nations. But yeah, I agree. There's a lot more similarities between us and the Canadians versus us and Mexico, especially with like crime and things like that. Well, I mean, I was going to say bribery, but I guess not so much anymore. There's a lot more government corruption here in the U.S. than there was just a few short years ago.
Yeah, and I wonder why that is too. It's like the breakdown of our nation on so many different levels is, I think, resulted in people kind of giving up on wanting to fight for this country, and not fight only in a physical sense, although I think that's true. I think there's a lot less patriotic Americans who are willing to die for this country, because now it represents what drag queen story hour, abortion, and gay pride parades. So in the same way, people aren't willing to fight for this nation on a more of a kind of social level, right? They're not willing to say, I'm going to put the community first and not my bank account. I'm not going to take bribes. I'm here for my nation. Now it's kind of like, this nation sucks. Yeah, I'll take your money,
Yeah. I think that's a lot of globalism has done that to us over the last several years. We've really lost that glue that used to bind our country together, even through difficult times, through the 60s and 70s when there were mass protests. We still had enough things that united us. Everybody would get together and they'd get behind the space race, or uniting against fighting communism. But as like anti-communist movement, as that was quelched, and I guess we lost a direction. We lost a shared common goal, and I'm not exactly sure when that happened. But I know that since it has, things have only gotten worse and worse. We're not a cohesive unit anymore. We don't have that shared vision of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sad to think, like, there was a time when we went to the moon, and, it's like, I think even like libertarians who hate spending tax dollars, they think about like the space race, and they're like, that was pretty cool that we beat the commies, and it's kind of sad to me, at least, that we don't do these great work projects anymore, because we could be doing, trying to colonize Mars. We could be doing great projects in the US and building magnificent buildings, and, improving our maybe like, what would you call them, like national parks and such. We could be doing a lot of things to make this country like a great civilization. But instead, it seems like all the Democrats care about is getting more votes and flooding our country with migrants, and then the Republicans just care about business and offshoring our jobs to foreign nations and such. And it's like, where's the party for like the nationalist people who want to have a strong, proud nation? We can no longer be proud of our country in America, and that's very upsetting.
Yeah, you're dead on there. And NASA, for the investment that we put in it during the space race, it was actually cash positive because all the technologies that they developed that they were able to then license to private companies, from
Wow.
Kevlar and Mylar to the microwave, MRIs, all these different things that were developed by NASA. Then they would license them to private companies, and it actually earned more money back than we put into it. And it's not the only government agency you could ever say that for. So
Interesting.
yeah, it was productive on more than one level because then again, we were learning all these new things. It served as a uniting thing. People grew up wanting to be astronauts instead of wanting to be, e-girls and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, why aren't we learning this in school? I never learned that in school, that America invented all of these great things. I think we kind of instinctually know that America has invented some of the greatest things in all of history: the automobile, flight, general relativity. There's so many things, electricity, so many things that we could go on about that America has invented that's improved the world. But even like you said, things like, Kevlar to protect ourselves in the military, and things like the MRI machine, right? And all these new inventions that came, whether it's from the space race or otherwise. I mean, we should be studying this in school and being like, the American people are a proud people. We put man on the moon. We create these extremely big scientific advancements. We make these leaps and bounds ahead of all other nations when it comes to industry. But we don't learn that now. We learn about how America sucks, and we learn about critical race theory, and we learn about all this bogus, made-up history about America, like how the Americans came here and genocided all the Native Americans. And I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth. We should be learning about the proud accomplishments of our people, not trying to destroy our statues and teach our kids to hate themselves because of their skin tone.
Exactly. History in schools today, they focus on the mistakes and the faults of the people that were before us instead of focusing on their accomplishments. And then they want to judge people by today's standards, even for things that at the time were just normal behavior, normal language. And it doesn't apply. But if you use that false dichotomy, then you can warp the minds of people to where they hate our nation, they're not proud of us, they don't want to build things up, and they become much more self-centered and also more open to the ideas of socialism and communism.
Well, speaking of judging people based off normal language, we can judge Joe Biden based off his very abnormal language, and we can also judge him based off these insanely terrible gas prices, up to $10 a gallon. That's what people are expecting to see. It's going to hit California first, but my goodness, who knows if it's going to come to the rest of the country?
Yeah, and so I clipped this morning when the high was at 457 for the nationwide average. I think it's up to 463 now, or 464. It's gone up again since then. Yeah, and in a couple states now, they're already having to go in and reprogram gas pumps to prepare for two-digit prices for gas to hit $10 a gallon. I've got a friend that's lives up in Canada. She sent me a text earlier of a picture where it was $2.44 a liter, which is 3.8 liters per gallon. So they're basically already at $10 a gallon. Now, granted, she does live in kind of a rural area. It's a northern province close to Alaska. So I know her prices are typically a little higher than normal. But still, if they're closing on $10 a gallon in Canadian dollary dues, that's still $8 a gallon here.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to start seeing things like that very soon. In California, we've already hit $8 a gallon. I almost said $8 an hour. Soon enough, an hour of work in this country, in like a state like Texas, is only going to get you 1 gallon of gas. You will not be able to afford to drive to work soon enough with gas prices getting this high, which isn't completely insane to me. But we're already getting as high as $8 a gallon in places like California, and I think New York is getting up there as well as other states. Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to hit. I live in a more conservative state with lower gas prices traditionally, and we're already seeing it hike way up. It's past $4, and it's never, ever been that high before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's right around $4.30 a gallon out here where I live in Ohio. And again, we're just expecting it to keep going up. I mean, what's really sad is I remember seeing a survey a few months ago now where they were saying, by summertime, we'd hit $5 a gallon. And I was thinking, that was probably high at the time. Like, maybe during a holiday weekend it'll spike up that high. But now, if anything, it looks like they shot too low, that we really could be seeing $7 to $10 a gallon, even in the free states, in the next few months.
Wow. Yeah, and it's just shameful to see because, again, families get hit the hardest by this. And what a lot of people don't account for as well is the fact that, gas prices don't just hurt you at the pump yourself, but it also increases prices of everything because everything needs to be shipped, right? You want to order something off Amazon? Well, there's a driver who has to drive it to your home. If you want to buy groceries, there's a truck that drove those groceries there. So every single step in the supply line is now increased in price, which is obviously going to be passed on to the consumer, because, whether it's by flight or whether it's by vehicle or however they want to transport it, they're probably using gasoline or diesel. And as the price of gas and diesel goes up, the price of your products are going to be going up as well. So the middle class is just getting completely hammered, not to mention the fact that inflation itself is a tax on savings because the amount of money your savings is worth goes down the more inflation goes up. Yeah. So, rich people have their assets, they have real estate, they have shares in companies. Middle class people, they have the money in their bank account and a paycheck from work, and they're the ones who get hit the hardest in every single factor here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as the buying power goes down, the little savings you have is worth less and less. Your paycheck doesn't go up at the rate of inflation. It's where, the government's reporting 11 point whatever percent, whereas, if you go by a little better indicator, we're actually closing in at 18 to 20% inflation right now, which is absolutely insane.
And aren't we supposed to be at like 3% a year? I think that's what economists say is like a healthy growth rate of an economy. I think that's total BS. I think we should have like a stagnant growth rate, but economists say that that's wrong and it should always be inflating. But at like 3% is like a healthy rate. 5% is like, whoa, we're getting a little faster. So the government is officially, like Biden is saying, yeah, we're growing at 11% inflation now. And you're saying, it could be as high as like 18 plus.
Yes. Yeah, there's a website called Shadow Stats that you can go through and look up all kinds of numbers and metrics. And one of the things that they do on there is they calculate inflation the way it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember which it was, where we changed how it was. And this is a lot better way of looking at it, because the way we calculate inflation now, it takes out or undercounts a lot of things that are bigger factors for us that they say like, oh, well, fuel prices fluctuate too much. So, that's not necessarily a good indicator. So we need to lower the value in this calculation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they play games with things like that. But the idea is you look at a basket of goods. So those exact same goods, what did they cost 2 years ago versus today? And then that's what determines inflation. So if you go by their metric, last time I think it was 17.8% is where they said we were at. But that also doesn't factor in other things that we do have that weren't counted whenever that last metric was put together. So like home internet access, things like that everybody's paying for. Yeah. Because those are part of your daily items now.
And energy as well.
Yes. Yeah. And here's, good headline. Energy bills. Struggling families are forced to seek refuge at McDonald's. They're going to hang out there because of the air conditioning or the heat.
Oh my gosh. And and the internet and everything there.
Yeah, exactly. Because
that's insane.
They can't afford to at home. We had the stock market dropped, I think it was 1,100 points yesterday. So the markets are nuts. And we've got a whole other page of this stuff. The price for chicken wings for a dinner is up to an average of $34. This was in California, granted. But this restaurant was saying, a year ago for this same large chicken wing dinner, it was $16 and change. Now they're having to charge $34 because the cost for them to get chicken used to be $40 per, I don't know what kind of unit it's sold in. We'll call it a 40-pound bag. And now they're paying over $180 for the same thing, and it's less than a year later.
Whoa, that's crazy. Yeah, and inflation, there's no signs of it slowing down either. The Fed doesn't know how to deal with this, nor probably should they deal with this at all. But, this is the problem is the government, they keep putting like the gas on. They're not pumping the brakes on the money printing machines. They're printing more and more and more money. Congress just last week gave another $40 billion or a total now of $40 billion to Ukraine. Boom, just print that money out of the Federal Reserve, send it away to them. Our market is inflated now, but at least Ukrainians have their weapons. Saw a video, by the way, today of the what's the name of them? The Azov
Battalion.
Militia?
Yeah, Azov Battalion.
They're officially now a part of the Ukrainian military. I saw a video today of them training a 9-year-old boy with braces in combat. I'm like, what are you doing? So our $40 billion is being printed off in the Federal Reserve, inflating our market so we can give like a javelin to some literal 9-year-old in Ukraine so that he can blow up some Russian tanks or whatever. I don't know why we're doing this. And in addition, now Congress wants to give everyone $800, which granted, at least they're helping the American people now. But again, you're going to have to print billions, maybe trillions of dollars throughout the course of the year when you're doing these stimulus checks, just like they did with the coronavirus. So, for better or worse, whether those checks should have been printed, all of this contributes to the inflating market, which hurts us a lot in the long run.
Yeah. Well, I saw like the cost of now this previous stimulus was a total of like 2,400 per person, but that what that was actually going to cost people once you figured in the taxes with the bill and all the administrative costs and all that, once you pay it back in taxes, was almost $8,000 for you to get that little
Whoa.
bump of stimulus. Yeah, because of all the other money that's hidden in those bills. So this and
Right.
then this 40 billion. Because yeah, I saw that the Senate approved it. I think today. But this puts us up to a total of, I think, $70 billion that we've given Ukraine now.
Whoa!
Yes. And we're not
I'm
done yet.
lost for words.
They're already talking about another 20 billion to them for humanitarian aid this time. I'm not even sure what that encompasses.
Oh
But
wow. Okay. And Mike, how much was it to build the wall again on the high side?
the high side was 8 billion. So
Whoa. And we've given how many billions to Ukraine so far?
counting what they approved today, so the money has not actually left our hands yet, 70 billion.
70 billion. So we could have built like almost 10 border walls with like the state of the art equipment, like 8 billion on the high side. It was 4 billion originally. And then they were like,
Yeah.
you know what? If we want to make this really teched out, we'll do 8 billion. We'll have like drones and stuff. We'll have more people patrolling. We'll have, I don't know, probably had like landmines and like machine gunners and
Oh,
stuff.
I wish.
It was like teched out. I mean, we can hope so. But that was $8 billion. And we've sent the equivalent of 10 of those walls to Ukraine so that they can have their borders and their national security. But we, of course, can't have ours. And this is both Republicans and Democrats who are
Yes.
doing this.
Yeah, because I think it was only 8 or 9 people that voted against it. And you can probably figure out who they were without thinking about it. It's Rand Paul and
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just a handful of senators said no. Everybody else went along with it as usual.
Shameful. Yeah. So, I mean, the American people are getting hit harder than they ever have, or at least in a very long time.
Yeah.
And with the inflation going up, it's like things are going to get a lot worse. Your food is going up in price. Your gas is going up in price. I bet a lot of people aren't getting, pay raises at work right now, too, because everyone is getting hit very hard by this. So you can expect, if anything, people are probably getting laid off and such right now. So, things are so hard for the middle class right now. And what is the response? Let's give billions of dollars in foreign aid, not just to Ukraine, but like to so many different countries, but especially now a lot extra to Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, anytime there is something coming up, and the Biden administration isn't even being honest with people with this whole formula shortage. They were aware of it months ago and did nothing. I mean, they're the ones that basically caused it by closing this facility in Michigan that produced oh man, I'm bad with names. Whatever this major brand of formula was, I think it was but anyway,
and then sending it to the southern border.
Yeah, and to Ukraine. We filled planes full of formula and sent those to Ukraine too. And yes, the southern border is fully stocked. Same with Mexico. Mexico itself, there is no shortage of formula if you go over the border to Mexico.
Wow. And I mean, look, I'm not trying to be like against, babies having formula or whatever, but we have to be realistic here. Like the U.S. government's role is to take care of U.S. citizens. Okay. And it's bad enough we have to babysit however many millions of people ran across their border illegally and start using up all of our resources. Because, of course, we have to take care of them. Right. But now we're taking care of like babies in countries halfway across the world who, by the way, I'd just like to mention the fact that if America was invaded by China, I don't think that Ukraine would be sending billions of dollars to us and baby formula to us when they needed it. And, putting their people through inflation and putting their people through food shortages for the benefit of American people. That would not happen from Ukraine. It wouldn't happen from any country. Maybe a couple allies like Germany and England or whatever. But
Yeah.
the vast majority of countries, especially the ones that we're giving billions and billions of dollars to every single year, they wouldn't do a single thing.
Oh, exactly. They wouldn't even think about it. And you're exactly right. We'd probably get we'd get a small amount from like Japan and a few of our other like stronger allies that are, would be more than willing to step up and help us because we've helped them so many times. But otherwise, you can forget about it. They're not going to be sending us $40 billion checks for anything. Doesn't matter what happened. Invasion, natural disaster.
Yeah.
They can't be counted on.
It never happens. I mean, how many natural disasters have happened all over the world where America chimes in and we send our manpower and we send our money and we write checks? But how many natural disasters has there been in America? And I've never seen a foreign government on American soil helping out. Like we don't get, international organizations helping us out, and we don't get international money coming in here. We have to take care of ourselves. But the problem is not that we need to take care of ourselves. We can do that just fine. But the fact that we have to apparently take care of all the other countries on the planet because we're for some reason obligated to do so.
Yeah, we're still Team America, World Police, and
I guess so.
Yeah, that's the way it's going to be until we do something about it. If we finally put our foot down and just treated everyone else the way we're treated, which is what we need to do, we can't keep funding all these things. I don't mind like a short-term thing, like there is an earthquake somewhere and we send, is it Rescue Team 1, whatever our specialized military unit is, that can go into like buildings that are collapsed and pull people out. That's fine if we want to send that, but we don't need to be sending $40 billion aid packages to whoever.
Yeah.
We need to be cutting off all foreign finance of anything and then reevaluating what countries we want to send any money to. We should also be deploying our military on the southern border to put up a wall and prevent anybody from coming in. So if we're already anticipating food shortages and other things, we're already seeing these on our shelves. How much worse is it going to be if there's literally millions of migrants right now on the trail up from South America through Mexico? How are we going to feed these people when they get here? How are we going to feed ourselves when they get here?
I don't know, but I mean, it's also kind of odd to me. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, like on a moral level or whatever. But like, we always have to have food for prisoners. We always have to have water for prisoners and electricity for prisoners and for anyone who's in federal custody, right? So it's like, these people cross here illegally. Maybe they don't get caught and now they're in our economy and they're undercutting wages and they're maybe committing crime or doing these other things. Maybe they get caught and they go to prison. In either case, if you're in prison, you are getting fed. If you have a baby and you get, put in prison, your baby gets fed their baby formula, right? The American people, though, do not have this luxury. The government will never go to your home and knock on the door and say, hey, we know you have a hungry baby. Here's some food. But if you are a criminal who comes to our country illegally, you're a foreign person, you never step foot in America in your entire life, no one in your family tree has, you come here, you break the law, you kill someone, you go to prison, they'll make sure you're taken care of 3 straight meals a day and showers and the whole wazoo there.
Yeah, exactly. They're issuing debit cards and even cell phones. People that have crossed our border illegally, so they have the minimum they need or whatever till they're 8 years
to organize
later.
Their drug deals.
Yeah, till 8 years later when they finally have a court date with an immigration attorney.
Yeah, and then they appeal it and they're here for another 4 years.
Yeah, pretty much. So again, it's just taking advantage of our system. And we talked about this before, like, some of these laws work when you have a moral people, but the problem is we don't right now. We have people that are just willing to abuse our generosity, when then we have other people within government that are taking advantage of that because they see this as they can manipulate the polls, they can change. I just saw an article earlier that just due to illegal immigration, like how many extra people were appointed for different states that went to Congress because of how apportionment's done. So like in California, where you have millions of illegal aliens that live there, this adds up, and with their count of the census, then they're given extra representation in Congress.
Right. Yeah. So because basically how that works is like the census determines the districts for Congress, right? Now, luckily, way back, Congress made it so that we no longer can add any more House of Representative members. Thank God for that. So now what they do basically is, imagine you live in a small town in California and you make up a district and you get one, House of Representative member. Well, the problem is, or let's say you get like 2 or whatever, right? Someone in Southern California, let's say, they flood in 1 million illegal immigrants and they're living there. Now, they can't vote. However, they are counted on the census, and the census is what determines where the House of Representative members' districts will be. So now they see, oh, there's 1 million extra people here. You guys only have like 100,000 or whatever. So we're going to take one of your representatives and put him down here, basically, so that the people can be represented more adequately or equitably or whatever. So what they're doing is they're increasing their Democratic representation in states, even like California. It may sound kind of crazy. It's like, oh, California is Democratic. Well, they're growing even faster as a Democratic state because of the flood of illegals who add to the power of these very blue districts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because, again, you're diluting the voting base further. You're putting all these people in that can't vote, but they count for apportionment. And
now, if they were going to red states, I might have a different opinion on illegal immigration. If we built a big prison in like some rural northern part of California where all the Republicans live, and we put all the illegals in this big compound or whatever, and then they all got counted for like members of that district, that would be great, because then we'd have like 10 more House of Representative members from that district, and of course it's a red one, so we get 10 red representatives. But unfortunately, that's not the case. They're all moving to LA, San Francisco, San Diego, these strong blue districts that will never flip red.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even like Texas, that's what's happening. I think that's also why they're busing them outwards too, is because they want them split up and into areas where they can dilute the vote, but they don't want Texas to gain any strength from it on the other side of that coin.
Right, exactly. Well, Texas can legally succeed from the country apparently, and not only that, they can also legally break their state up into 5 different sections. So if they did that, they would still be considered a part of America, but 5 different states. So they could actually like what I guess like quintuplet or whatever, they'll times they'll have 5 times more power in the Senate or something like that, or quintuple it or whatever, because now there could be 10 senators from like Texas, which is now 5 states, and that would actually be a really, really strong power move from Republicans if they wanted to do that. But no one wants to give up Texas though, because united, it's so strong and powerful. There's no governor, there's no state legislatures who would want to split up the state.
Yeah, that's the catch. But man, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, think about having
on a federal level. Yeah, it would help a lot.
Yeah, all of a sudden we'd have an 8-vote majority in the Senate.
Oh yeah,
and there's no overcoming that for the left, because you can also bet your ass that these senators that would come out of Texas would not be wishy-washy Mitt Romney Republicans.
Yeah,
these would be
say,
Ted
we're not
Cruz.
going to be getting the Mitch McConnells and the Mitt Romneys. We're going to be getting like some hardcore kind of guys, hopefully, especially if it's split up into like 5 different states, and you have like the crazy like northern Texans who like have never been down to Austin or like even Dallas in their life. They're like way up where like Oklahoma or whatever is. They're like, they're the ones we want in office.
Yeah, and that's what we need too. Is we need governors competing with Ron DeSantis. Which Carrie Lake in Arizona, I think she's going to give DeSantis a run for her money when she wins Arizona this year.
Yeah, well, that's great to see that we have strong Republican leaders running. And we also have, luckily enough, some very weak leadership in the Democratic Party. Joe Biden totally jumped the gun when his handlers made him sign into, I guess not even like, what was this, an executive order, or would this just be within the executive? Whatever it was, he put into place this disinformation branch, and guess what? It's gone. Mike, tell us a little bit about the disinformation Minister of Truth situation.
Yes, the disinformation diva is done. There won't be any more, or the Mary Poppins of misinformation. That was, I think, my other favorite title for her. Jeez. But she resigned, and then they closed down the disinformation board. Again, like there were already calls to defund this, and supposedly they had enough support from Democrats too in the House to push a bill through if Pelosi would have let it come to. Well, I think there are a certain amount of Democrats that see this as a threat, because they don't want the Ministry of Truth all of a sudden being under Donald Trump's control next time, or whoever the next Republican president is, because then
and the other thing too is not only like the Republicans controlling it, but like the wrong type of Democrats controlling it. I can definitely see the Nancy Pelosi's being very worried about the AOCs running the disinformation thing, because there's a lot of opinions that kind of, I guess you would call the old guard Democrats hold that the new hip progressives are not too fond of. So I'm hoping that we can accelerate that split in the Democratic Party. That'd be fun to see.
Yeah, well, I kind of think it will go into overdrive after this next election, especially if there is a red wave, which all indications are it's going to be a tsunami, not a wave, because then there'll be a fracture within the Democrat Party to you're basically going to have the extremists on one side trying to draw the party in that direction, saying, well, we lost and we got our butts kicked because you guys weren't fully on board with this stuff, with all of our agenda. And then you're going to have the old guard saying the opposite, that no, we need to move towards the center. That's why it was a blowout.
Yeah, and that's actually going to be a really funny argument to watch, that like AOC and like the squad, they're going to be like, if we would have had a few more drag queen story hours, we could have had the blue wave, but you just kept pushing that we can't have transgender children.
Yeah, we were just one gender reassignment surgery away from victory.
Yeah, exactly. Total socialist victory was only one more child transition away from us.
So one other thing with this disinformation board, and we'll move on, but just before they disbanded it, they started with the rumor that no, Joe Biden did not start the disinformation board. It was started under Trump. And I guess what they did is pointed to something under Homeland Security, some obscure ruling or law or whatever. I don't know. It didn't really make sense, and even the mainstream media couldn't cover Biden for this one. So yeah. And then lastly, we just have the slippery slope over here of of misinformation, which starts with shadow bans, then fake fact checking. Then we have our
Yeah.
Ministry of Truth, then your digital ID, and that leads us to social credit scores.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny how these things kind of happen all at like the same time almost, but like at different degrees because, you know, social credit score, when you think about it, we have like a very real social credit score in America. It's just done on a social level and through like companies as opposed to being like state enforced, which in a lot of ways is actually like worse because at least like the government, everyone hates and we can all look at the government and all complain about it and we can see like the rules and there's structures and there's bills. Like in China, it's like, if you pick up banana, you'll get 10 points. And it's like, okay, I'll pick up bananas and get 10 points. If you steal, you lose 10 points. And it's like, okay, if I steal, I lose 10 points. But in America, it's like, you made a joke 10 years ago on Twitter, and it was about gay people, and now we like gay people, so you'll never work a job in your life again.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do I gain points? You don't gain points. There is no gaining points. You only lose.
Yeah, and that's literally exactly what it is. And you have like comedians, whatever, and again, that like said something 10, 15 years ago, and then they get major roles or gigs taken away from them. And that's what we're moving towards, and that's what the left wants more of. They want to police your language and police your thoughts is really what it is. They really want people only being able to voice the state-approved opinion and only be in that camp, and there not to be any opposition. And they want a legal method to do that.
And like I said, too, it's like it's sneaky how they're using like corporations almost to do it where they're like, you know, no corporation will hire you if you have a controversial past. And it's like, again, I would almost rather have like the government just say like, here's the rules. And if you break the rules, here's the punishment, as opposed to this like totally arbitrary system we have today where just like the mob decides at a whim who they persecute and what they're going to, you know, persecute them with. You know, it's like, this comedian made a joke, but they're a liberal, so we'll give them a pass. And this person is like queer, so we can't really be mad at them because they're on the victim hierarchy pretty high. But this guy's a white straight male. He didn't really do anything wrong, but let's not ever have him get a job.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the rules are arbitrary. They change it all the time. So what was acceptable a few months ago is forbidden. And you know, we saw this with COVID over and over again, where things being just arbitrarily declared misinformation. A lot of times, it's things that turned out to be true. I always joke around and say, you know, the conspiracy theorists ought to just be called the coming attractions, because anymore they're right half the time or more.
Yeah, no, they are. And I mean, I remember back when they said, remember when Trump said like, oh, I was the one who did the vaccine Operation Hyperspeed or whatever it was called, Warp Speed. And the liberals were like, it's not safe. I'm skeptical of vaccines. My body, my choice. And then it's like, oh, Biden takes over like, you know, a month later or whatever. And it's like, oh, the vaccine is 100% effective. We love it. It's perfect. And then, you know, the conservatives are like, oh, well, it doesn't really like stop you from getting corona because like I had the shot and I got coronavirus. And they're like, no, that's misinformation. It works 100% of the time. And it's like, okay, so we don't have to wear masks because the shots are 100% effective. No, the shots are not 100% effective, but the masks are. So you still have to wear the masks and get the shot. And now it's like, we're like, okay, so the masks aren't effective. That's misinformation. Now we don't have to wear masks anymore. So it's just every single time we just keep getting like, you know, we're kind of doing the reverse of what the left does to us. We're actually getting inch by inch at a time down the line. But the whole time we just knew the truth. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. And with these shots too, and the effectiveness, you know, now there's studies coming out that are saying people that are like quadruple vaxxed are actually more likely to get COVID because it harms harms your immune system or something. And this shot does. It's the COVID's theory.
Well, and remember back, like way back when this started, but like way back, like March 2 years ago, whatever. I can't believe it's been that long. When like saying it was from China was like a conspiracy theory. Like that's how far back, like that's how wild the left was. Like, don't say it's from China. We don't know where it was from. It could have been from anywhere. It came from France, you know, where all the diseases come from, you know? Yeah.
Well, I remember like the mayors in a couple of cities, like going out and like, go finding like a Chinese person to hug. I'm trying to remember what city it was.
Yes, in New York. I remember that.
Yeah. And in Italy, the one mayor, and I was like Milan, I think, was doing that, and it ended up with COVID a few days later. And then that was like when they had all the real scare videos go up. Yeah. But, again, it's not racism. Like closing the border because a country is like got an infection or there's an outbreak of a disease, closing the border with them. You're not doing it because they're Chinese. You're doing it because they're infected with the coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And it's like no different than if like, if we started a virus, we'd probably close our own borders, right? And I think
Yeah.
China did the same thing. I think they closed their own borders, at least for like general population or whatever. So it's like,
Well,
even if it was because they're Chinese, it's like, no, it's because they're Chinese and Chinese people have the flu or whatever. Like, I mean, it's just so redundant to even talk about.
yeah, and actually, so China did the opposite. They limited travel within their own country, people moving province to province, but continued to allow international travel. And that's why
Oh,
you
okay.
had these hotspot outbreaks in Italy and a few other places where I guess there's a lot of traffic back and forth from China. Um,
Hmm.
so that's part of what caused
Interesting.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so they limited domestic but not international travel. That's interesting. I thought they did. I thought they limited both, but that's it wouldn't
They,
surprise me if they didn't really care about the rest of the world. In fact, they probably wanted the sick people to get out and get stuck in Italy and have to quarantine.
I
And
think
that's
they
the thing
did.
is like in a twisted way, I really respect China's ultra nationalism, where they're like, oh, we have a sick person, maybe we send them out of the country. Whereas in America, we're like, oh, there's sick people in China. How about we bring them in so we can take care of them?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas they're like, we're not going to suffer through this alone. Send this guy off to wherever. Let's
Yeah,
get them
it's not even
infected.
about their national interest. It's just like we don't want to suffer through this by ourselves. Let's get the Americans sick too.
Yeah, well, I mean,
The
so
whole world.
the story that I heard is basically like when they had when they were dealing with oh, what was it called? What was that lung infection called from a few years ago? Um,
Bronchitis.
no, it was another one out of China, not the bird flu or whatever, but SARS. So like
Okay.
SARS, they did quarantine, and they were like the only country that really dealt with it in a major way, and it hurt
Mm.
their economy and everything else. And a decision was made internally that if there was another big disease outbreak there, they would not close down borders, they wouldn't quarantine, and that way the whole world would have to deal with it, and they wouldn't be the only ones
Oh,
that had to take the hit.
that's interesting. That is actually very, very interesting, and that makes a lot of sense because look how much our economy got crippled, and by relative standards, China is doing better than if we're doing worse. Same with the rest of Europe, the rest of the world, frankly. So that's totally reasonable to believe that that would be the case, and they've done much crazier things than allowed their borders to stay open, right?
Yeah. So I mean that's just the tip of the iceberg for them, but it's it is an interesting mentality because on the other hand, like I really can't knock them for it either because they want to they don't want to be taken out of the fight. They don't want to be less competitive than the rest
Yeah.
of the world. So that's how they
Well,
choose
and
to react.
that's the thing is like China is very, very pragmatic and like very practical in their thinking, and they're very nationalistic. And I think like every nation is just like they should at least should be naturally nationalistic. Like, of course, like this sounds like a foreign concept in the West now, unfortunately, but like
Yeah.
the Chinese government understands it should represent the Chinese people and act in the Chinese people's best interest. And in America, I really wish, as I mentioned before, the American government would act in the best interest of Americans and not Ukrainians or people all over the rest of the world. So China is going to easily overtake the U.S. as the world superpower. If they're not going to be on the same level as us, they're going to pass us because America has taken on this role of let's take care of everyone on Earth. Whereas in China, they're like, well, let's just take care of ourselves. And it does not take a genius to figure out when a nation only thinks of what's best for its people versus a nation that only thinks about what's best for everyone else's people except its own. It doesn't take a genius to figure out which one of these nations will win in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we talked earlier about like the space race and having this unifying goal. China does this where they'll have the plan for the next 10 years or the next 20 years or whatever
Yeah.
of how they want to get from point A to point B. And it is a national goal. And again, that's a unifying factor for your people. And we have nothing like that now. That is not how our nation thinks.
Exactly. And we have so many internal divisions right now that it's like so difficult to even think that way, right? I mean, I often think every time I think of a great policy that would help America and American people, I think, well, our system's so broken that it wouldn't work, right? Like people always harp on about universal healthcare, how they want free healthcare in the US. And first of all, it's just like not affordable. There's a great debate between Senator Cruz and Senator Sanders, Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, and Cruz just mops the floor with Bernie with all these facts and stuff. And Bernie just repeats over and over, I believe that it should be a universal right, and just tugs on your heartstrings. Cruz points out how it's like literally just not practical. Like it's not even like a moral argument. It's just like we literally do not have the money at our disposal, especially right now, to be printing trillions of dollars that we would need every single year to afford this. And people say take from the military budget. It would take 10 military budgets to pay for a few months of the thing. Yeah. So long story short, you know, there's these policies that you think, oh, this would be good for America. But then you think, oh, wait a minute, how many illegal immigrants do we have in this country? It's upwards of like 20 million, 30 million, some estimates have it at. Those people are going to be taking the most advantage of this system. You're not. So we can't have it. And we have these people, it's not just illegal immigrants, but many other groups in this nation who will kind of like mess up certain systems just for us. And for that reason, there's so many issues with trying to push through good policy because there's always going to be bad apples to spoil the bunch here.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of people here that always like to point to other countries that have some type of universal health care or socialized medicine, but they never really look at the whole picture. In a lot of countries, there is still like co-pays and other things that go along with it, or there'll be criminal charges against people that abuse it. Like I remember a story in Germany about a woman that was a hypochondriac where she ended up doing jail time because they told her to stop going to the doctor every time you have a cold.
Wow.
Yeah, so... But the affordability is the big thing. And right now, you know, we don't want our taxes going up to where you're paying 2/3 of your income to the federal government just to subsidize programs, you know, health insurance and other things that we pay for now, leaving that to where the employer and the person is paying the bulk of it is the best system. What we really need to do is open it up more and allow more than just, you know, one of the big harms that came out of Obamacare was getting rid of a lot of types of health insurance.
Oh, yeah.
So now you have what they used to call major medical, and it's the only thing you can have is these all-encompassing plans. But somebody that's relatively healthy or younger, or somebody like, you know, like myself, getting, like I'm not worried about paying even $100 to go to a doctor if I have to. What I'm concerned about is, you know, needing $100,000 for surgery. So for me, you know, something like a catastrophic only plan would be ideal. I can afford medication, I can afford a trip to the doctor, but I don't want to have to pay $50,000 to stay at a hospital overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, me and my girlfriend were talking about this, and she brought up a good point. I mean, I think it's a good point. Maybe we're totally wrong about this, but, you know, we were thinking, wait a minute, insurance, let's just say it costs like $200 a month or whatever, health insurance, and you pay that for like, you know, 3 years, right? You've paid upwards of like $10, $20, $30,000 by the end of that 3 years. Well, what if you only get hurt once in that 3 years and it costs $10,000? You could just get a loan and pay off the loan over like the next year or two for cheaper than it would have been to be insured under health insurance, you know?
Yeah, that's genius. And that's like the way you need to be looking at it. And you know, that's what I thought about years ago before they had these changes with Obamacare and before you were forced to have it or pay a penalty on your taxes until Trump got rid of that. That for a long time I had catastrophic only insurance, and I worked for a company that actually gave me a kickback of what they would have spent for me in benefits. Was added onto my check once a month, which granted it was only like $300, but still I was paying, I think it was $37 a month for a catastrophic only plan. And then I just put money in a health savings account, which I still have. And, you know, that sits there tax free. It generates interest. And if something did happen, I pay my whole copay or deductible off of that account. The insurance then covers the rest of it. And then I go back to my normal life.
Right. And speaking of other nations, like you brought up earlier, you know, the left loves to say, look at Sweden, look at Norway, look at Britain, look at Canada, look at Australia, whatever. Or like every developed nation in the world or whatever. But what we don't keep in mind is that, first of all, America's like the most diverse country probably on the planet as far as its like cultural, ethnic, racial makeup. And for that reason, it's kind of difficult to compare ourselves to like Sweden or whatever. Or Sweden is now like a mess, like Norway, let's say, which is like 100% like Nordic or whatever, right? So there's demographic differences, of course, as well as population differences. Bernie Sanders will bring up like Singapore. Again, it's like an ethno state of people with 110 IQs and 6 million people who live there. Bit different than America with 300 million people, very diverse, etc. But, you know, you look into these other countries. I did a paper on universal healthcare in college. You can look at Britain, and there's been like several women who have given birth in waiting rooms because there's just no availability. There's people who go on wait lists that go up to like 9 to 12 months for like back surgeries and such in Britain and in Canada, or knee replacements. And guess what? You don't get compensated for all those months you're out of work. And in places like Canada, you cannot even go to a private clinic. It's illegal. They may have changed that recently, but when I wrote this paper in 2017, it was illegal to get private healthcare because that's not equitable. So you could be out of work for a year And what so many Canadians are doing, I think it was upwards of 60,000 Canadians in 2018, they actually just flew to America to get their surgery and then go back because the free healthcare was so crappy. They'd rather pay tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket, fly to the US and get it done, and then go back home than go through the free system that they have there.
Yeah. So when I used to live in Kissimmee, Florida, near Celebration, and that is a destination for Canadians that come down. Celebration Hospital is actually adding an entire wing just for Canadians that were coming down for some type of long-term treatment like cancer or specialized surgeries because this was just a cash cow for them.
Wow, I wish I had some Canadian jokes prepped for that. I'm sure there's a lot you could find in there. That's a gem. A whole wing of a hospital just for Canadians.
Yeah, and when I say whole wing, like this was an entire building. It took 2 years to build. I think it was 800 rooms, and then they were planning another expansion after that. But that was when I moved back up here to Ohio. So London, I saw something recently where like the wait time for an ambulance could be up to 8 hours. And in the UK, they do still have, if you can afford it, they do still have private health care. Whereas in Canada, they outlawed that because of the competition and there being two different systems. But in the UK, they do allow, there are still private hospitals, private whatever. Like if you can afford it, you can get better service.
And the thing is too is like people don't understand that this free healthcare, it doesn't just cover everything. Like you don't get your medication covered, you don't get your prescriptions covered, you don't get like hearing problems covered. It's bumps and bruises, broken bones, things like that. Like very basic things. Like if you are born perfectly healthy and then you get in an accident, that's what it covers. If you're anyone who has any type of disability, that's not covered by the healthcare, right? Like I said, if you need prescriptions, if you need medication, you need glasses, whatever, all that stuff is additional. You pay out of pocket. It's just as much as it is in the US or anywhere else.
Yeah. And with Canada, it's lack of access. Like part of the way they control the price is by controlling the usage. So like, give you a perfect example. Well, perfect example. So they used to always say like there were more MRI machines in Cincinnati, Ohio than there were in all of Canada. And this was actually true. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I have a friend, actually, it's the same one that sent me the text earlier. She used to work with race horses and show horses. She was kind of like a high-end person that, was known for this trade. And she was thrown off a horse, broke her neck. Luckily, she can still move and walk around as normal, but because of the delay for her to get to an MRI so they could do whatever surgery, two bones ended up being fused because she had to wait over a week to get in to get some of these procedures done before she'd go for surgery. So now we're talking about somebody like middle of her 20s now. She's then crippled for the rest of her life, can't turn her head different directions, gets constant headaches and all that, and just can't work a normal job. And again, like if she had been here, she would have immediately gone in for an MRI, gotten the treatment she needed, been back on her feet. And like you said,
and you don't hear these stories, of course, from Bernie Sanders or anyone pushing healthcare, Elizabeth Warren, any of these other people, and these things kind of go under the radar. You wouldn't hear about this. This isn't an official press releases or anything like that from the Canadian government, Australian government, UK government. So, anyways, I mean, we could talk about healthcare for days on end. I would recommend to everyone to watch the Ted Cruz versus Bernie Sanders debate on it. It's pretty old. I think it's from 2015 when they thought those were the two people who'd be running in 2016 against each other, which would have been an interesting fight. I would have actually loved to see Trump and Bernie go at it. I think that would have been interesting to see. Hillary was just so boring. But anyways, putting that aside, it'll be interesting to see it won't be Biden's boring too, but I'm glad that Trump will be hopefully running in 2024 and he can take back the White House. And throughout this crazy time, we appreciate you guys being here with us on Punching Left. You can find us on all other platforms at punchingleft.com, and please subscribe to our Telegram channel. It's the most important one, punchingleft.com. You'll see all our social media, but Telegram is the one where we put all of our media and updates about going live. That's all I have for you guys today. Mike, why don't you sign us off?
Yeah, thanks again. And everybody, this Sunday, we're going to be joined by a special guest. We'll post something about that ahead of time on Telegram. But thanks again. We'll see everybody soon.